Good evening. This is another episode of Kojo's Corner. This is episode 6. And again, on Kojo's Corner, we're talking people, participation, politics, and power. So today we have some long standing Hamiltonians joining the show. We have Mr. Jeremy Freiburger, Stoney Creek resident, and we have Mr. John Best, publisher of the Bay Observer, and you used to work for CHCH, right?
Yeah, I managed the newsroom there for 15 years.
Yeah. So some people might not know, but an interesting fact about Mr. John Best. So today we're talking Stony Creek. Stony Creek has been in the news, lots of conversations, lots of decisions, lots of opinions, lots of experts. And so I just thought it's important for us to have a discussion about it, see where people are at, and what happens next. So let's start with Jeremy. You live in
Sure.
Stony Creek. So let's get your Stony Creek perspective. And before you start, again, those watching, this is not an all encompassing. We're just having a discussion here. Nobody is saying it's the gospel or anything like that. So Jeremy, um you live in Stony Creek. You heard about the parking lots and the decision. Quick question: did you go to Councillor Francis's town hall meeting? Because he did have a town hall meeting to
He
discuss
did.
this. Yes. So did
Yeah,
you
no,
go?
unfortunately I didn't get to go. By the time I found out about it, it was too hard for me to fit it into my schedule. So sadly I
Mhm.
didn't get to go. But yeah, as you said, like I'm a Stony Creek resident. I literally live across the street from the parking lot in question. It's a block that way. Um, so I walk through it probably 20 times a week, going to either get my son at school or go to the convenience store or go to Shoppers Drug Mart. So I have been involved in the parking lot for every day that I've lived here, basically.
Mhm. So then when we before the votes, there's the two votes happened. So what's your perspective on the discussions that were going on with respect to the parking lots in question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because there are so many different discussions. There's the discussion in council chambers or at GIC. There's the conversations that are going on social media or walking down the street. Um, and I think they're radically different. I've been really disappointed with the online conversation. I think it's been full of vitriol towards people that no one has identified yet. So I've been watching it very closely, seeing things like the BIA change language in their posts from affordable housing to low income housing. And then you hear those words, low income housing, echoed by delegates at council from the neighborhood who are advocating to keep the parking lot. So there's been a concerted effort, I believe, on behalf of the BIA and the chamber and a number of downtown businesses to refocus this conversation on the people. And despite what many of them say, it's not about people versus the parking lot, it's about all sorts of other things. The intentional use of language, I think, is super important, especially when we're going in front of council or delegating online at a council meeting. When we start to attribute words like low income to people, that is meant to evoke a certain connotation, and I think it's dangerous. But I think it's in their minds, I think it's worked for them. I think they've set up one kind of dialogue. The conversation around council, and I rewatched a couple of them today around council and GIC. Um, I'm, there are a handful of counselors I've always been impressed with, and a handful of counselors I'm never impressed by. And I find the conversation around the council table really challenging because they've set priorities and they've made those priorities public, and a number of the counselors continue to drive us back to council priorities, and others want to have exemptions all the time. It's not about this parking lot or a parking lot about people, but we're here to help next time. It's always next time, and I find it really frustrating. So, it's been an interesting conversation to watch because I think some true colors of communities are coming out, and I don't like them.
Mhm. So, Mr. John Best, you have a particular view. What when you heard about the discussions, like what was your response, or what? How did you see the tenor of the discussion going, or how do you connect that discussion to the priorities that council has set?
Well, I don't have the benefit of Jeremy's perspective. He's a resident of Stoney Creek, and so he's in the neighborhood. So I'm observing it largely from what I saw in council and largely what I saw on social media. I did talk to Councillor Francis a number of times about it. Um, to me, and I don't, I hadn't followed, quite frankly, what the BIA had said. Whether they started using language like low income people. So I can't speak to that, but it seemed to me that the first, for somebody that's largely following it on social media and council, but largely social media, the first sort of slogan I heard was, it's about parking over people. And and so to me, that was the message that was getting out. And of course, that portrays, the people of Stoney Creek as being, insular, backward, parochial, that sort of thing. And so I talked to Francis about it, and I hadn't realized, frankly, until he told me that he had a public meeting and 200 people showed up. But I guess the piece that sort of influenced me the most was the fact that there was a petition got up, or several petitions. I guess the combined total of them was something like 3,000 signatures. And, we can all talk about um, our principles and, uh, and certainly council priorities. But 3,000 signatures, if you're a councillor representing a ward, 3,000 signatures is a very, very powerful message from your constituency. So, and I think what I felt about, you'll probably get into the strong mayor piece later, but I think what I felt was that what the mayor said when she did finally indicate that she was going to invoke the strong mayor powers, I think what she said would make sense if this was absolutely the only publicly owned location in all of Stoney Creek where affordable housing could be built. But there seemed to be fairly strong arguments around the people that use the lot. And I had a talk, I had a talk with MPP Jack Collins today on another matter. He was involved in some housing announcements today from the federal perspective. But of course, he represented the area as a councillor. And, he told me that back in his day, just before he joined the federal government, that he had asked his colleagues, in fact, they formed a committee to find publicly owned land that could be used for public housing. And he's a very big advocate of public housing. He spent some time in public housing as a kid. So he knows whereof he speaks. But the way he set it up was, rather than have staff go around and try to identify properties, in his case, he sat down with counselors and said, what have you got in your backyard that we might be able to use? And he identified there was a property in Dundas. Then Councillor Sam Marula, of course, came up with that piece of property in the Queenston traffic circle.
Yeah.
And there were other properties, and most of them now have actual public housing going up on them because of steps that were taken 3 or 4 years ago. And his point, and I think it's a valid point. I'm not one of these people that thinks that the councillor should be the king or the queen of their,
Yeah.
absolute dictator in their own ward. But I think there needs to be taking into account what the local councillor is saying and hearing. And I think it's presumptuous of a councillor outside the ward to assume the worst about a councillor who's constantly interacting with community groups. They're at public meetings. They have to show up for everything that's going on in the community. I didn't think that Councillor Francis was that his view on the matter was given much respect. In fact, I thought he was somewhat disrespected.
So I mean, on this podcast, we delve into the specifics. I won't comment on disrespect, respect, but one thing I wanted to show everybody, and I want to get your comment, Mr. Best, because I think if I can share it, I will share it. Okay, I think we have it here, and I will read it out loud so that you don't have to read it. So this was the DIC report that had the list of all the properties, the public owned properties. So it was 171 Main Street. And here they said it was 0.47 acres. Then this, and that's Ward 2. Then it was 9 Clarence Street, also in Ward 2, located Queen Street North and Hess. That's 0.44 hectares. Then there was 70 Hope Avenue, Ward 4, located Hope Avenue near Kenilworth. That's zero point 0.7 acres. Then there was the parking questions, 5 and 13 Lake Avenue South, Ward 5. And then there was Garth Street, 1126 Guard Street, located on Garth and the Link Parkway. So this was the whole list of properties that were brought before council, and I guess again, Councillor Francis lifted those Lake Avenue properties, and so my question to you, Mr. Bess, is like the other councillors as a group decided that the other properties were okay to move forward. So my hypothetical question here is, if all the other councillors in these specific wards also lifted it up, and maybe there were petitions that were also 3,000 or so, right? Would that mean that council should say, okay, because in every ward there were 3,000 people that signed a petition, no housing should be built on all of these proposed um locations? I'm just asking, like, fairly.
You're asking me?
Yes, like,
Well, as you say, it's a hypothetical question. That didn't happen.
okay,
What
fair enough.
happened with Francis was a unique situation, very strong community pushback. And councillors have many duties, but one of them is to reflect concerns in their community. And I don't think, and the other point here is that Francis had been working with the Board of Education trustee, Todd White, on an affordable housing project further down on Lake Avenue at the Lake Avenue School.
Mhm.
And that was a project that actually been proposed about 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And he was very actively working on that, because that was there was a number of reasons why that would actually be quite a good site.
But it got turned down.
Well,
the project got thrown out because they decided it was untenable.
Well, they were trying to revive it, and it seemed to me, I mean, you're looking at these 2 parking lots in Stoney Creek. The staff report, the one you just showed me,
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, it says it's going to take 2 years to convey the properties to somebody who might be interested in building on them. So I did a little homework. I phoned up the Hamilton Home people.
Mm-hmm.
And so what have you got on what's in your pipeline, so to speak, for affordable housing?
Mm-hmm.
So they gave me a list of 10 projects. And of the 10 projects that they have on their sort of their priority list, they only have funding for 2 of them. So the other thing is, who's paying for this affordable housing? The city's going to give away the parking lots, fair enough.
Yeah.
They're going to sell them for $1 or whatever the case.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no guarantee that with these other applications, and these applications are being done by the Hamilton Home Group, which is a consortium of most of the major affordable housing builders in our community. They've got 10 projects here, and they're looking for financing for 7 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing is being justified as a housing emergency, but I think realistically, if it's going to take 2 years just to get the property handed off to somebody, we could be looking at 4 years or more before somebody's actually moving into a unit.
So
Clark,
I think that's an important point, John. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of that reality of developing any property taking time being a reason to not start any, should it not be a reason to start more? To say we need a pipeline that's full, so that there are projects being we're putting pressure on a long list of projects all the time, and that we've got ample fodder to go to the upper levels of government with to say, look, we've identified 20 priority sites. We've got people that are waiting for funding and financing. We're not a community that hasn't put anything new on the list for a decade. We're trying to solve a problem. And if we keep waiting until it's this chicken egg thing, we're not going to wait until the federal government shows up and says, here's $50 million, build as much affordable housing as you want. They need to see us as a municipality pushing up to them. Shovel ready project, let's go. So I think this, I'm concerned that the idea of saying, well, that one was going to take too long, let's wait and find one that's faster. There aren't any that are faster in this real estate market. We have to start pushing as many projects as possible. So when Councillor Francis rebutted this decision by saying, well, fine, I'm going to go and look through every ward and find affordable housing opportunities everywhere. Get on it, brother. Go for it. We need that kind of attention on it. So if you think that that's a way to penalize your council colleagues for voting for, or for penalizing the mayor, I'm all for Matt Francis looking for affordable housing projects across the city. Go for it. But we're going to start here. Like, we have to put some of our own property on the list.
Well, when we're talking about penalizing, I would point to 2 examples going in the other direction. After the first vote, the first 8-8 vote, where the parking lot proposal was defeated, we immediately get what I would consider kind of a peevish motion from John Paul Danko of Ward 8, saying, okay, my motion is that we now install paid parking all through Stoney Creek, and that we set the rates at a level that not only will pay for the parking, but will provide a surplus that can be used for affordable housing. Now, that's a pure punitive, petulant, to my mind. And I'll tell you, I've been following this council. I've been in this city in some capacity, most of it as a journalist, since the early 80s. And we had some pretty wild councils, especially back then. And I have never seen a councillor attack another ward. It's not so much yes, verbally they attack each other all the time, but to actually propose something of that nature in another ward. And then you had Kassar again proposing an amendment that he thought would be some kind of a compromise without speaking to the ward councillor involved. I've never seen that kind of behavior.
So hold on. Let me jump in there a little bit. So And this is why I wrote a piece in the spec about maybe the problem is not the strong mayor powers or the slogans or all of these things. Maybe it's the people, right? Because, like Mr. Best, you are saying somebody brings a motion forward. Okay, you might not agree with it, but then the response is then, okay, now I'm going to put paid parking in your area. Then another person does another thing. Then another person brings the strong mayor powers. Then now another person is saying, okay, wait till you see what happens. Like
Yeah.
when we are watching this and you've commented, you're saying it's wild. I think that is also part of the problem. Steve Paikin wrote a thing on TVO, and in his conclusion about the encampments at City Hall, he said, look, if we're going to get out of this, like, decision makers have to start thinking. I don't want to use the word outside
Out
the
of the
box,
box.
but
Yeah.
but but they have to start being proactive in what can be done. When I spoke to a couple of people in Stony Creek, I think one of the things that they said was, why is it that there couldn't be a compromise? Why couldn't they keep the parking lots and build housing? Sometimes there's underground parking. Sometimes there's alternative parking. Like, wh- why is it that it's always like
Yeah.
this, and it's not like, okay, folks, let's sit down together. We all know we are in a housing crisis. We all see what's going on in the city and in the world and in the province, in the country, and but we've waited
To the
two
last minute.
2 years. Yes, two
Yeah.
years we wait for an 8-8 vote for somebody to bring a strong mayor powers, and then now, hey, Councillor Francis, Councillor Clark, Councillor Beatty, they want to get together now. But my question would be, why did it take this for you to then say, okay, we are now all going to get together to
Right.
come up with a solution? And that's where I struggle sometimes, right? Is because we engage in the, like you said, petulance and pettiness, and we have major issues to solve. So what's your response to that? We'll go with John, and then Jeremy, you can follow up.
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know why they behave the way they do. I'm not responsible for it. I only observe it.
Mm.
But I just think there's, we can look for blame. We can. Uh, we've always had councils in this city, as long as I've been following them, where there were uh, conflicts between members. So that's not unusual. But this council has a deep ideological divide.
Yeah.
You got the Gang of Eight versus the Hateful Eight, and I'll leave it to you to assign which eight you want to assign. But that's what we've got, and frankly, I see people being scolded at council by the people that I would refer to as people who consider themselves to have higher intellectual and moral qualities than their lesser colleagues. I see finger wagging. It's
Bertina's been
not as
throwing
much
pens for
fun.
decades, John.
Pardon?
John, Bertina's been throwing pens at people for decades. Whitehead's been
He
calling
threw
people
one
idiots in
pen.
council for decades. This isn't anything new.
He threw one pen when you were probably still in high school, and the Hamilton Spectator never let him. He apologized for it. He docked his own salary. He volunteered a dockage of salary,
The guy
and
was a
he
clown.
apologized. And
So
Christ, here we are 15 years later, and we're still hearing about it.
But that's what
so
I'm saying. It's
What happened
nothing
to
new.
forgiveness?
so let me ask both of you this question. And I have been thinking about this recently. Like, we all work in a workplace, right? And there are people that we might have conflict with, but we still work with them. There are people that we disagree on. If I'm to use your word, Mr. John Best, ideological philosophy, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if we are not working together, right, then and we just heighten the divisions and the you did this, I did this, da 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 da, da, then what are we actually solving? Because at the end of the day, people their real life impacts on not addressing certain things.
I think it was Councillor Clark in one of the council meetings. His comment was that we have a serious public engagement problem as a community. I think we've had it for since amalgamation, maybe before. Hamilton's known as a city with a laundry list of projects that it fumbles on because we are poor communicators, whether that's between each other or from council out or public in. And so I think Councillor Clark brought that up when Matt Francis asked for time to do some public engagement. And I think that my gut reaction, like you're saying, Kojo, is like when you're in a place with a lot of different people, you've got to find a way to still move forward. And I think that comes from leadership, right? It takes a strong leader or leaders in an organization to rally disparate ideas and disparate minds to focus in on what we really need to do. So, maybe some of the fault of where this narrative is gone and the candor of the discord is gone lands at the feet of Mayor Horvath, in that it's her job to try and move that group as a whole towards the priorities that have been set by council as a whole, and not have it that we've got the happy eight and the angry eight or whatever they are. That between meetings, her job and senior staff's job is to aid her in that, is to convince individual councillors of a path forward, find the compromise. I think where she got to as a mayor was that seemed kind of deadlocked. And so I think by using the strong mayor powers, what she was doing was saying, I'm going to put and I do this as a boss sometimes, I'm going to put one of these disputes to bed. I'm making a call. We're going with A. Now that A's been decided, we're all still part of the same team, but A's been decided. So with that set aside, now let's make good choices together. So I think it's incumbent on the mayor now, because there's bad taste in everybody's mouth. Me and my neighbor, literally neighbor, are on completely different sides of this. She delegated to council, I didn't. But it's up to the mayor now to find a way to reignite her team around the idea that we've decided it's affordable housing. But we've heard from the community, as much as I think some of the things said by some of the delegates are absolute fabrications, the parking is essential. There is definitely a way with the smart minds in this community to have a parking lot and housing coexist. There has to be. So let's put that to bed. If we can all be adults and push the negativity out and say, great, Clark, Francis, everybody, Beatty, let's get around the table, BIA, Chamber, whoever, and find the way. Now apply your made in Stoney Creek solution to the decision that's been made by the mayor. It's affordable housing on these lots. Let's do it the best way possible for Stoney Creek. If we can't get there, then we need an election. I don't know.
Oh no, don't
We're getting one in 2 years.
Yeah, don't go
I'm
there.
kidding.
The strong mayor powers, I don't want to delve on it too much, but I still think it plays a huge thing. I said I don't think it should have been used. If you believe or have a principle that the strong mayor powers are anti-democratic or whatever, you stick with that principle. All right, fair enough. Now I'm saying that now that it's been used, and I get your point, Jeremy. You are the boss. You say let's go, and people got to deal with it. But in politics, usually there's no boss per se. So the
But there is
repercussions.
now. Yeah.
Probably yes, but there are ripple effects of that decision.
Yeah.
And now we are hearing some of the comments and whatnot. What happens now? Like, and when I say what happens now, I'm not just talking about the Riverdale community hub page. I'm just talking about the conversation,
Yeah.
because this conversation is still going to happen. It's not, if not in Stony Creek, Dundas. If not in
Yeah.
Dundas, Ancaster. If not in Ancaster, the mountain. If not mountain, Binbrook, wherever.
Yeah.
So what happens next? We'll start with John and then we'll follow up with Jeremy.
I don't know exactly what's happening next. I don't think any of us do. I just my general thought on strong mayor. Um, I don't understand why Ford didn't repeal it when he repealed. Remember, this was all about housing, and to give Andrea credit, if we can draw two comparisons here between Andrea and our next door neighbor mayor, Marianne Mead Ward. With Andrea, at least you can say that she invoked it on a matter involving housing.
Right.
Whereas with Mead Ward, it's about an apparent human resources issue, departure of senior managers. It sounds like it's more to do with her management style. So having said that, I think she pulled the trigger too soon. I don't think we. It's one thing to say, can we have parking and housing on the lots, but then you're still on the lots. And I think what didn't get explored more fully was what are the affordable housing opportunities in Stoney Creek? I think if we approached it from that question, what can we do in Stoney Creek? Because these two parking lots, aside from the fact that the city has said they're willing to give them up, they're no closer to any kind of development that I can see than would have been the case with the other Lake Street property, which had been discussed over a period of several years. And I'm not advocating for the other one. I'm just saying, what else is there in Stoney Creek that we don't even know about that might have had some ability? She's pulled the trigger on this strong mayor power. She can't put the genie back in the bottle. You've now got three councillors representing Stoney Creek that have formed a voting bloc within a voting bloc. And I think, and I guess just my general thought on strong mayor, any anti-democratic measure that is brought in, that, if that is going to be a long-term or a permanent solution, I don't think people will put up with it on a long-term basis. We're just so used to majority rules. And to me, when Ford backed down on expanding the boundaries of the municipalities and the Greenbelt, this strong mayor thing was a companion piece to those measures. I think he should have scrapped them all. He's left, in some ways, he's left in place what you might argue is the least supportable of the three measures that he put in. That's my thought.
No, fair comments, John. And I agree. My initial gut feeling about strong mayor powers was that I was worried about them, that I didn't quite see when they'd be necessary. But I feel like it's funny. It's like the role of mayor is a really weird one. And I often felt in the past when watching other mayors, and it didn't really matter who, that they kind of got to skate away from decision making. They were only the tiebreaker. They weren't really that involved in budget. They were one of many voices kind of thing. And because they didn't represent a specific geography, they got to kind of play favors wherever they needed. So I kind of felt like this new budgetary process and the strong mayor powers all of a sudden meant that we'd have to watch the mayor way more, like they're of greater value now or whatever than they perceived to be in the past. So, and with it tied to housing, I was fine with the decision that Andrea made to pull the trigger and say it was on housing. Whether it was the right time for her to use it, I think is a totally valid question. Did she give the conversation enough room to play out and maybe find compromise, maybe not offend so many camps, or create so many camps over one issue. But at the end of the day, I'm glad she's made that decision. Councillor Kretsch brought up that no matter whether we build 23 units or 67 units on these two plots on Lake Avenue, and maybe we build 100 more on the other Lake Avenue property, we are still miles and miles away from our affordable housing need. Miles away. So I want the idea dispelled from Stoney Creek residents and my neighbors that it's A or B. We either do the two in the parking lot or the one over by the school. And then we're done. We're done with our affordable housing contribution. No, Stoney Creek needs to keep looking. It sounds like we've got 3 locations. Where's 4 and 5? They must exist. We've got a church at the end of the street with probably a 600 car parking lot. There's parking, there's spaces everywhere. So I think it's important that Stoney Creek, the BIA, the chamber, and residents not get trapped into this narrative where they think it's A or B and then we're done our part. It's that we need all of these sites for affordable housing. We now need to think about how do we do them really, really well, so that we're not, cutting off the arm despite the leg or whatever. So we need to rethink that. So I hear you. I think that maybe it was early on Strong Mayor Powers, but the reason I've let it go in my mind is because it was housing driven, for sure.
Oh man, yeah, that's a tough one. I think it was in today's CBC Hamilton, they talked about the community hub pitch. One of the things that they mentioned was that um, they would have to get permission from the province, because in the if it's a school owned property or something like that, it has to be under the Educational Act
Yeah.
and whatnot. Like I find that sometimes it's like some of the easy tasks that we could do or that the municipality has control over,
Yeah.
like maybe they should do that properly and just communicate it with people, right?
Right.
Like I'm on the mountain, I think about the Garth Street proposal. I went there, I looked at it. It's pretty small, but I was like, you know what, there's going to be housing here for people. Cool.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes maybe we wait too long for the discussion so that when people hear the news, then they feel like they haven't been heard, and
Yeah.
so they go somewhere to voice that anger and not hearing. And maybe that's what Councillor Clark was saying. We have an engagement problem, and we all have to fix it. So
Can I ask a question of that, Kojo?
sure, sure, sure.
So that implies that that community consultation is needed for civic decisions. So I don't think personally, I don't always agree with that. I think we've elected officials, we've set priorities. Not every citizen has or needs the ability to have their voice heard about every project. And I think the concern with affordable housing is that all it turns into is a NIMBYism circle, right? So if we go out and say, is it okay if we build affordable housing here? Why do I get the veto of whether affordable housing gets built on my street or not? If it's been set as a multi-level government priority to build affordable housing across our country, I don't think I should have to get to say whether the empty lot next to me can be that. If my city officials and staff, who are all smart people and get paid lots of money to figure out these things, have decided that's the best spot.
They get paid lots of money.
You don't agree on the full definition I gave them?
Say no more.
Why? Like, I guess I just question whether citizens need to have a say in the micromanagement of our city, and I think it. In the world of consultation, I teach a workshop on community consultation. I've taught it all across the province. One of the biggest principles that I teach people about is the idea of honest impact. That if we go out and ask people for their opinion, We then have to be extremely clear with them about whether their opinion can change anything or not. So loads of people go to public consultation to say, I want my buses to be purple. And everyone in the room says purple, but then the city decides, no, buses are going to stay yellow because the Transportation Act says buses have to be yellow. Sorry, we shouldn't have asked you what color you wanted the buses to be. People expect, if they give their feedback, for it to be then implemented.
I
So
agree with you completely on that, and I think when we're talking about government at all level, but especially municipal, because it is closer to the people,
totally.
the public consultation is not only misused in every community, but certainly the two that I observe most closely, constantly misused, constantly used as almost a manipulative tool,
Mm,
where you say it's a box to be checked. So
right.
you can say
We did
we
it.
did it, we did the consultation,
Yeah.
and so you end up with things like 35 people deciding huge issues, and this is thrown into the hopper as part of the justification. So it's I'm very skeptical of the way public consultation is used, particularly at the municipal level. I've seen it misused in Toronto, and certainly here in on many major projects.
And I
Uh,
think in the case of the Stoney Creek parking lot, we actually have both sides of the debate using public consultation inappropriately. I would I would love to pick apart the 3,000 signature list. I would love to understand what the city's done to reach out, but I think maybe at the core of it is that the question is, does this require public input? It's city-owned land. It's zoned residential. It's a city priority to build affordable housing. What do citizens need to be involved in?
I have to disagree. I mean, we live in a democracy. We want to engage people, and I just I'm not on for saying, well, they're the experts. Let's just sit back and let them have their way. This is a participatory exercise, and I just would be very uncomfortable saying let the bureaucrats run it. Because I don't have the kind of confidence that, yes, they're well paid and they're probably well educated, but I think horrendous blunders
Oh, sure.
made by very bright people. I sometimes think that too much brightness can almost be a distraction against getting things done properly.
Yeah. So, maybe now all of you are bringing some important questions. We don't have time to answer those questions today, but I will tease them out a little bit. I think, I think what we are also saying is that meaningful community consultations with actual impact. And to me, and this is my opinion before people get out of hand, to me, to me, that is the role of the mayor and the councillor. Come to us, and I mentioned this in my spectator piece. I'm like, you bring people along. You don't sit back, wait for some decision to start
Yeah.
happening, and then you're like, okay, time to let's talk about it. And one of the things that I don't see happening is the continual uh, uh, uh,
Yeah.
uh, connection between you go to council every day, you're having all these meetings. Give us an update, not just in a
Yeah.
newsletter, but like tell us what's going on so that when things are coming up, we can say, hey, you know what? In 6 months, there's going to be a report that's going to come up with this and this and this and this and
Yeah.
this. Please do da 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 da. We don't see that. And again, I'm saying everybody. I'm not singling out anybody. I'm saying everybody. And then that's the way to make that connection. So I think the conversation that I'm hearing is we're not having that connection
Yeah.
between what's happening to what happens at council, and then we get into these huge discussions. There have been some people watching. Some of them made some comments. I'm going to read them out. Um, I get people were saying underground parking adds hundreds of thousands of added costs to the construction. So that's something to keep in mind. Uh, and then people were saying the veto power must be used within a specific time period. I think the it was 21 days or something like that,
Yeah.
if I remember. um the underground parking, okay, why not make underground parking when the apartments are made and a section for the city area? Well, yeah, we mentioned that.
Cost,
Yes, well,
cost.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, to the point of the cost thing, I think you brought it up, John, as a spur from another counselor. But I did the same math. I'll be honest. If the BIA is telling the truth and all 167 parking spots are busy 365 days a year, even if they were only netting $10 a day from each of those spots, which is pretty cheap parking, that's $750,000 a year that can go into the affordable housing pool. Can pay for the underground parking in 4 years, no problem.
Underground parking is very expensive,
Oh, it's
and
crazy. Yeah.
when I talked to when I talked to the Vrancourt people about the proposal they had for Ward 3, and one of the criticisms that the local councillor put forward was that there was only a handful of parking spots,
Mm-hmm.
and the answer that came back was, if we're talking deeply affordable housing, which they were, he was talking about $1,100 a month rent for 131 units. He said if people require deeply affordable housing, it doesn't follow that they necessarily have cars or need cars.
They're
And
likely transit users. Yeah.
yeah, they'd be transit users, and of course that's on the busiest transit line in the city. That's kind of a sidebar, but um, again, when they're talking about either underground parking or building it on stilts, as I saw, and we have seen configurations like that. Once again, though, it's back to that's the only place where affordable housing apparently can be built in the town of Stoney Creek, and I that's not true. So, if there's going to be compromise, there has to be a compromise on all elements of the debate, I think.
So the good thing is we are waiting to hear from Councillor Francis and Clark and Beatty's made in Stony Creek plan, and I'm hoping they take your recommendation to heart. And so when we hear or when there are any other developments of any other housing projects and prospects in Stony Creek and all of Hamilton and all of Hamilton, we'll bring both of you back to see if anything changed from the 12th April 2024 to whenever we hear those developments. So again, thank you very much, Jeremy Freiburger, Stony Creek resident. Does lots of work also in Hamilton. You can contact him and he'll tell you about all the work he does. And then we have Mr. John Best, the publisher for Bay Observer. And again, to those that are tuning in, I see we have lots of people tune in. We had like over 100 people watching. Uh,
Nice.
thank, thank you for tuning in. And again, the purpose of this show is to have some of these conversations in a 5 minutes news article. You can't have these conversations at council. You definitely cannot have these conversations.
5 minutes, and
So
then they ring the bell.
yeah, there you go. And we spent close to an hour, and we could even delve into more conversations.
Totally.
So um John made it through the hour,
You
so
did it.
that's good. Yes, he did.
Camera stayed on.
So thank you for tuning in. We have some great guests coming up in our next episodes. We have Dante Helen, young Hamiltonian resident that is going to be talking about his experience with model parliament up in Queen's Park. And then we also have Paul. Paul is one of the co-chairs of Cycle Hamilton, who will also be talking to us about some of his projects and cycling matters here in Hamilton. So Stay tuned. Again, you can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you very much. And again, it's bye from us, Kojo's Corner, where we center people, participation, power, and politics. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Kojo.
Good night, everybody.
See you, John.
See ya.